This is Karen with newclevelandradio.net, and it is time for the Intentionality Gurus. We welcome you today. We're the Intentionality Guru podcast, where we will explore the science and art of turning untapped potential into strategic impact. In today's episode, your host, Candace Pollock, will be sharing how even those who are thought to be successful can be holding themselves back from their next level of success and how to break through those limits to unleash their full potential. That's a mouthful, Candace.
It is, but try to define full potential. What would it look like in your life?
Um, wow.
How would you know you got there?
I probably wouldn't because there's probably something else as I've been climbing that ladder that I'm adding on. So I'm constantly adding on the things that I want to do or want to change.
Yeah, and people have written about it. Dan Sullivan, who is a high income um, a coach for high income professionals, wrote a book called The Gap, and he's always talking about how we have the goal in front of us, we're where we are, we're approaching, we think, we're working towards getting to the goal, but it's always just out of reach. And the reason is because we're focusing on how far we are from the goal rather than how far we've come from where we started.
Right.
And even when we can be conscious and remember those things, it's just a phenomenon. It's just, how our brain works because we are designed to persevere and to keep moving forward. That's part of our survival mechanism. We're going to procreate, we're going to perpetuate the species. And so we have to reach further for that berry at the top of the tree if they're in short supply. So, I just love the idea. I did an exercise years ago to determine the common denominator among all the things I do, because, I think it's clear in this conversation, in the past conversations we've had, that I'm always exploring things. And, I have a high curiosity quotient, which can be my downfall. So everything we do to a certain level can sometimes go beyond the functional level to a level that works against us, to a fault. So where does that show up?
Um, well, it's been showing up a lot lately that um, I had this impression before I had my accident in December that I was going to be at a certain point by the 1st of February this year.
Mhm.
Um, and obviously, I got pushed back. But right around the 1st of February, I thought, okay, well, I can do it all and I'm going to do it. But I find that the more I reach for it, the more excuses I'm making that as I'm sliding backwards. And so it dawned on me yesterday that, you know, even though I thought I was going to be up here by now, and I
Mhm.
feel like I'm down here,
Mhm.
um, I have to say that's okay and then start rebuilding the steps. But in my case, I've always gone for the big picture, and now I'm trying to go for the little picture. Just accomplish that one step, and that's good. And once I've accomplished it, then create the next step.
Yeah, so it's a perfect example of how we, are at whatever point we're at, and then we set a goal that's someplace in the future. And if we're thinking in terms of something practical, like a long jump in the future, do we have the kinetic energy and skill set, muscle tone, and everything else to make that long jump? And most of the times we're setting ourselves up for failure.
Right.
And so the kinds of the thinking habits that we have that keep us caught in that cycle are that all I have to do is set the goal and then work towards it. All right. But so many other things have to come into the mix to make that, to bake that cake, so to speak. What the gist of the writing on all of these concepts shows is that the more we can chunk it down to something that we like, you'd have to be almost an idiot not to get it done. And I don't want to denigrate people with that terminology if they self-identify in that way. But the smaller we can make the step that we know we can succeed with, then the more likely we will complete it, and the more likely then we'll take the next step and so on. And so what systems or process have you set up, or do you think you can set up that will ensure that you could get that tiny step done?
Well, I have two little sticky notes that remind me that, you know, one says you can do it, and the other one says be careful doing it. And for me, what that means is that, yeah, I know that I could record 20 podcasts this week, but the be careful reminds me that number one, I don't need to do 20 podcasts, and make sure that you are okay as you're doing it. And a great example was last week, I had a solid week planned. I was between coaching clients and podcasting. I was going to be busy 40 hours. That had nothing to do with the social media or anything else. And I was so excited when I looked at the calendar last Sunday, looking at the week. By Monday afternoon, I realized that I was just totally out of my mind, that I was going to fail if I kept working at that pace. And so I basically took a step back and started reorganizing things and letting people know that, I jumped in head first, and I probably should have tested the waters before I jumped in.
So it sounds like it was a matter of over um, committing or over um, allocating what you thought you could do realistically. So
Right. I mean,
overestimating your capacity, I guess, is the phrase I would use.
right. Because in my mind, that's where I wanted to be by now. I wanted to be, doing this 40 hours a week. I have no idea why I set that for myself, but that's where I was coming from at the end of last year. I can do it, and I will be so successful, and I'll be able to sit back and say, wow, look what I've done. And then planning it that way, and then seeing the toll it took on me, I realized that, you know, how am I equating success? And what I was equating success was the busier I am, the more I do, the more successful I'll be. And I realized, whoa, I'm falling apart. That's not success.
Yeah, so it takes a toll on you. So that's just a perfect example. But this is how, a lot of the social media tells us how to do things, the BHAG, the big, hairy, audacious goals, just throw your hat over the fence, force yourself to do it, and so on. But the question I always like to ask is, to what end am I doing it? Like, what is it? What is this thing? What purpose is it serving? And is it for the sake of getting it done, or is it for the sake of something bigger that actually calls us forward and not at our own expense? All right. So having, something I'll characterize that as a big, hairy, audacious goal, even though you didn't articulate it as that. It was huge. All right.
Yep.
So in terms of getting that outcome, you did not get it.
Correct.
Okay. So then the alternative is what?
To recreate the process that I can get it done, and I'm not abusing myself mentally or physically.
But not at your own expense,
Right.
or at the expense of something else which is important to you, which is your health and your independence and so on. Because if you like wipe yourself out or fell again or something like that because you're overtired, that could put a lot of things at risk.
Well, and I sort of heard your voice while this was going on last week. And I've been writing in a lot of my blogs, I am so grateful for this podcast because what I got reminded of was, who am I really doing this for?
Mm,
Why am I working 40 hours, and, getting all this out, because it's going to be more than 40 hours by the time I post and whatever, or
right.
write my notes. And I looked across the room that day. My husband was sitting in here working on his computer, and I realized he doesn't care if I work 1 hour or 40 hours.
Mm-hmm.
And none of my clients care either. It's not going to excite them that, oh, look, Karen's killing herself, and it was like, that's when the alarm went off. Like, what am I doing? This is craziness. So I had to reevaluate what it is I really enjoy. And if working 40 hours was something I really enjoyed, then maybe I was willing to push myself to do it. But maybe it was looking back at what I had planned and going through it and saying, this doesn't fit my purpose. I can eliminate it. And that's what I'm slowly doing now, is going through certain things and realizing, if it doesn't fit my purpose, then I'm not going to be successful at it.
Yeah, and that creates a big swim of all these ideas. There's BJ Fogg's concepts in there in terms of the tiny habits, the tiny steps, ABC, the anchor it to a particular activity you're reliably going to do, like you're going to turn on the light in the morning when you wake up. It's, at some point. You couple that with the behavior you want to perform, anchored to that anchor, and then C, that's the B. And then C, you celebrate it. And the celebration is actually one of the most important parts, because it's releasing the feel-good chemicals in the brain that will tell your brain it's got to look for more of those opportunities, make it easier, eliminate some of the friction or the drag on adopting those things. But getting to the idea of potential, that amorphous line that's always ahead of us, and we're never there. Maslow talks about his Abraham Maslow talked about the hierarchy of needs, and he basically said we have to satisfy our physical safety needs, the eating and all of those things, and then we have to get to the level of taking care of our esteem and our wherewithal. And we can continue to go up the pyramid to the tippy top, which is self-actualization. And that's where presumably most people would feel that they have fulfilled their potential. And the fact of the matter is, we've talked about it before, how it's ebbing and flowing in all of those. We don't just get to level one and stay there and then go to level two and stay there, that it's a given. We're constantly reinforcing all of those things. But the gist of it is, again, that question, to what end? So what is most important to you?
Um, what's most important for me is to enjoy what I'm doing. And so I realized when I had planned my week, I thought I was going to enjoy that. I thought that, hey, that's really what makes me happy. But as I jumped into it, I realized that I was trying to meet the expectation of what I heard other people say I should do. And I have one individual in my business life who is constantly saying to me, Karen, you have to do more, and you have to you have to change some of your formats, and everything is about like more and more work. And I was believing this for a while. But when it hit me last week that, who was I doing it for? And I realized I was trying to prove to this other person that I could live up to what they saw as my potential, but it wasn't mine. It was what they wanted me to do and the reward that they saw that they were going to get from it. And I just realized it's got to be about me, not somebody else.
Yeah, because, again, that amorphous, slippery potential, we're always falling short of it and so on. But in the context of what? Your potential in terms of physicality, like are you going to do a long jump? Is it going to be in terms of longevity, if we're just talking about health and wellness, just in light of your accident and so on that we talked about briefly? Is it going to be having, a number one podcast? Is it going to be, you know, having great relationships with your husband and sons, and so on. I mean, there, all of these things, and we have 168 hours a week. Like, how do we fit it all in? That Stephen Covey concept of, we have to put the big rocks in first, then the pebbles, then the sand, and then we can put the water in. The smaller things, the secondary and tertiary things will fit in around the big things. So in terms of potential, to be clear about the things that have brought you joy and your feeling of success and fulfillment would be where to start. And 40 hours a week doesn't sound like it would be that. Maybe what 40 hours can produce if it's well designed, but maybe not.
Well, and again, what I was focusing on with somebody else who was in theory trying to be my cheerleader and say, Karen, if you do this, and just kept building
The
that.
logical sequence. Uh-huh.
Right. It was like, this is how successful you're going to be, and you're going to be able to earn X amount of money. And just think, if you're earning that kind of money, then you don't have to worry about certain things. And it sounded exciting at first until I realized, maybe if I was 50 years younger, maybe that would be the path I would be willing to take. That's
Well,
not.
and I wonder about that, Karen, because th- I live in a world where we're always talking about that. All you got to do is, buy low and sell high to make money in the marketplace, right?
Right.
But the part that in the fine print that they leave out is, and you have to live that life,
Yeah.
So is that the life you want? So what if you were to be thinking in terms of the context of between now and, whenever you think, whatever time period you want, how do you live the life you want now that's in aligned with that path that you're going towards?
Well, and that's where I finally came from. It was like, you know, I hadn't even made it a full day of the week. It was, midday Monday when I realized that I was unhappy. I was feeling physically miserable. My relationship with my husband was tense because he didn't see that I had even 5 minutes for him in that 40 hours. Okay. And it was like, when it all came tumbling down, it was like, I got to refocus. And let's get back to what is really important for me and important for me today. That could change tomorrow.
Mhm.
But, I don't have to take giant steps. I can take baby steps. And maybe I'll take those baby steps a little bit faster than if I tried taking one big giant step.
Without the fallback, yeah,
Right.
without, falling backwards. But the other part that I think is essential, because, again, I live in this world where, the bombardment of this kind of evidence, all you got to do. Well, if it were that easy, everybody would do it, right? So there's a flaw there somewhere, an essential element that's off. And for me, what occurred to me was, I was following a lot of the anecdotal traditional advice on how to do a particular thing. And what I discovered at the end of it was that I had postponed everything else in my life to do that, when the idea was that thing would give me the things I wanted in my life. So I built a bigger hamster wheel. And I certainly had my moments where I think probably were similar to what you experienced, that I would look at my calendar and realize I had no more runway. I had more things than I could possibly do. And I would say, please, God, please just help me get through this. I promise I'll never junk up my schedule again. And of course, I would do it again and again and again, because all you got to do, right? Just be orderly, just do this, just do that. But when I started to do various exercises and so on, not physical exercises, although that was part of it, um, and get really clear about the things that made me feel the most fulfilled and happier. They were often in the service of others, but not to breach boundaries, not to be over
Right.
serving, because I think you and I share that quality, and to be clear about what the things I'm saying yes to, how they are either serving or undermining that sense of fulfillment. All right. So that's what led to me realizing that the common denominator in everything I do is finding and tapping into that untapped potential, finding and leveraging it. Because we all have it. We all have these things where we feel we're falling short. Well, that may be a mindset thing. It doesn't mean we are falling short. It just means that that's our mental framework. And there's reasons why we have it. So that gets into the science-based stuff um, behind that kind of thinking. The other part was, to be healthy so I could be autonomous and not have to rely on others, because I deal with clients who regularly, have declined and, they've lost their autonomy. So that means I have to work out for getting older and, to maintain my health and my diet and so on. And it also means that I have to support myself. I'm a widow and I can support myself and so on, but there may come a time when I can't. So how do I do that? So do you see how, paying attention to the question I always, or the phrase I always use is, to what end? How do these come together, those areas of life, so that they're not competing with each other? Because if we're saying we want to, be healthy and get exercise and get rest and so on, but then we have a calendar with 40 plus hours plus the worry and the thinking that go before and after and during, we're probably ramping up our stress levels. So I said a lot. What stands
Yeah.
out to you?
So, it's interesting because as children, we hear our teachers often telling our parents, that maybe we're not living up to our potential in math or English or whatever it is. And it stays with you as you get older. Okay. Well, if I didn't reach my potential there, where else am I not reaching it? And I remember at my last corporate job I had, at one of my one-on-one meetings with my manager, who was almost 20 years younger than me, maybe 30 years younger than me. I sat across the table from her and she said, Karen, you're doing great, but if you'd only live up to your potential. And I walked out of her office, didn't ask her what she thought that was. Okay. But I walked back to my office and I thought, if I'm doing great, what am I not living up to? And that was the beginning of my downfall in corporate America, because I kept striving to do more and more and more. If they needed somebody to work overtime, I didn't even raise my hand. I just did it. If there was anything that had to be done anywhere in the office, it could have been even sweeping a floor, I jumped and I did it. And as I was leaving that job, one of the things that manager said to me was, you defeated your potential. You never took a
Gee,
break.
thanks.
Yeah. And it was like, you know, I remember walking out of there thinking, but I was taught to keep pushing and working and doing. And again, that's where I came from at the beginning of this year. because I had been working with this one person who kept telling me about all these things that I can do and I should do. And when I do it, this is where I'm going to be. And I felt for it because that's not where I really want to be. And
So, so if you were to articulate, if you had had the presence of mind then to articulate where you wanted to be, what would you have said? Do you think you knew?
I probably would have told the person that, I don't think we're a good fit to work together because that is not where I want to go. And I would explain, this is what I want to do. This is, you know, this is what I may need help with reaching what I consider, my apex. But I didn't. It was like, well, this person's been doing it, for years and he charges a lot of money and people pay him for it and whatever. And then I realized I was doing the same thing. I was paying him for what? To take me down a path that I didn't want to go, but I didn't have the voice initially to tell him I didn't want to go there.
Yeah, and we there's so much data that we don't have because that's my experience with the bigger hamster wheel, that I was following a system that somebody else had used that was successful. And there's a lot of those things out there. Do it this way. I was successful. This is how I achieved success. But we don't know at the expense of what relationships or their health or their finances or, all of those things. So, one of the things I would like to do today, starting this time, is to basically say, all right, let's treat this as a mini little workshop and say, what's the one thing you can take from this conversation today, going forward that you can be building on with some of the later podcasts that will lead eventually, if people want to sign up for the self-sabotage to self-command bootcamp that I'm going to be releasing in late March. The idea is to, let's pull these things apart and really get some traction here, but not my way, not your way, not, the person's own way, where they understand what it's all about, why they're doing it, and why they keep getting in their own way. Because we keep getting in our own way because of our thinking, all of the input from others. Society wants to distract us from our activities and so on, or I guess we accommodate all of that extra stuff that just consumes so much of our energy and lifeblood, so to speak. So if you were to, until we do the next podcast, look back for the listeners and for you to look back on your life and identify the things where you felt fulfilled. So think of like the five areas of life that are traditionally thought of. So there's the career or vocation, there's finances, there's health, there's relationships, and then there could be, spirituality or whatever that happens to be. And there can be more areas of life, but those tend to be the five core things. So in any of those arenas, where have you felt the most fulfilled or the happiest, your happiest moments? And why? Was it with other people? Was it not with other people? Were you on your own? Was it something work related? Was it something health related? And so on. And you just write them down. You don't have to make a judgment about them. You don't have to share them with anybody, but just to be really clear about it. And then we will kind of go into a conversation that builds on this, about how to then take that and help it become your North Star. So then now you get to see what measures up and what falls short. The things that look like it could be something, but they actually are that long jump that isn't going to take you where you want to go. So what shows up for you now if I said all of that?
Um, a lot of different things, but one is the refocusing on, um, what really is important to me when it comes to the business, rather than trying to get to an apex, which may or may not be mine.
Yeah,
So
you're not postponing, the outcome isn't contingent on you doing that 40 hours. You're going to be living the outcome and then aligning however number of hours you may or may not work to that thing, that
Yeah.
lifestyle that you want. Mhm.
Well, I am looking forward to the boot camp, and you say towards the end of March, correct?
Yep, towards the end of March, I'll be sending out notices. So if people want to get on the wait list, they can email me or send it to me at the Candace at the Intentionality Gurus, it's plural, and .com. And if they have comments or thoughts, be happy to listen to them and so on and chime in just to have this discussion because this is a chronic problem. We started the new year, we had some things, but now the barriers will start to come up and we'll start to falter at the wonderful ideas and thoughts for ourselves that we have from time to time.
Sounds good. Well, I want to thank you for another great inspirational podcast today. And I want to thank everyone for joining the Intentionality Gurus. If you enjoyed this episode, be sure to subscribe to us on Zoom and share it with others. Be an inspiration. And also leave us a review. And you can also contact Candace. We'll have her email in the show notes. And if you're ready to learn how to recognize whether and how internal barriers are holding you back from your next level of success and how to unleash your full potential, stay tuned for more from the Intentionality Gurus Self-Sabotage to Self-Command Bootcamp coming up in March. And I will be one of the first ones on the list. I know it. Have a great day, Candace.
All right, you too. Take care. Take small steps. Be intentional.
I will.
Bye-bye.